Hi, I'm Angel with FleeceFun.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute quilt. So many squares. It's a Riley Blake pattern, and I'm using my Cricut Maker to cut out all of the elements, which is pretty dang awesome. This video is sponsored by Cricut. Compensation has been given for this video. All right, now I am not a big quilter. As you know, I like to keep things simple. I like simple quilts, like my rag quilt. Excellent quilt, easy to make. So I decided to kind of ease into this whole quilting thing and try a simple quilting pattern using my Cricut Maker. Now, one thing that I like about this is that all the elements are provided. So I have the fabric already, like the sizes already picked out for me. I have the pattern already designed. It's just a matter of kind of following the instructions and piecing it together. It's quilting by numbers is really what it is, which is nice for people like myself who don't quilt all the time. All right, for this project you will need the following: a Cricut Maker with a rotary blade, one Riley Blake fabric kit, quilt batting, fabric for the quilt backing, and you'll need to see the pattern for the correct amount. Cricut's rotary cutter, ruler, and mat. This makes prepping the fabric really easy and fast. 12 by 12 fabric mat, and I'm going to recommend that you have at least 2 just to make things go faster. Brayer, again, not necessary, but nice to have. A 1/4-inch sewing foot, makes things so much easier when you're sewing that quilt top together. Iron, ironing board, sewing essentials, and of course access to Cricut's design space. And you'll want to print up that PDF of the quilt pattern. It'll just make it easier to reference. All right, once you've gathered up all those elements, it's time to get started. Now, the first thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go into the design space and pick out your pattern. And there are a lot of different quilt patterns that you can choose from, ranging from things that are a little more simple, like the one I'm going to show you, to much more advanced, and they're beautiful, and someday I will be worthy to do such quilting. But until then, we're going to stick with the simple stuff. Once you've picked out your pattern, and the pattern that I chose was the So Many Squares pattern, it's time to get started. Now you're going to have to do a little bit of prep for success. When it comes to success with quilting, organization is key. To make sure that I could keep the pattern straight, I took the paper in the kit and labeled the fabrics the appropriate number so I could keep them straight. I then labeled the amounts I would need to go on the fabric mat and mat number that the Cricut Maker would cut it out on. I double check my work to make sure that I have it all right before I start cutting things out. Since the fabric's been folded up in packaging, it's a good idea to take a moment and iron it all out. Then, using the handy ruler that happens to be the perfect size for the mat, I cut out the fabric to the right sizes. Now, take note. In the pattern, it says WOF. This stands for width of fabric, meaning that you don't cut the fabric to the exact size of the mat. You're going to leave it long. Also, make sure that you trim off the selvage. Since I had work to do on my desktop while my maker was cutting items, I opted to use my iPhone. I made sure that I had the correct mat chosen, and I got my maker linked to my phone through the Bluetooth. If you've done other projects with a Cricut machine, you're used to working with material that's a little smaller than the mat. However, in this case, to conserve on material and to simplify the cutting process, the material will be longer than the mat. It's just going to fall off the edge. As you cut, lay your blocks out into neat piles to make assembly easier. You don't want to have to iron all those little pieces. Now, one thing you are going to notice is that after several uses, your fabric mat is going to start to lose some of its stickiness. You can, just using a little bit of warm water, a little bit of dish soap, and a little bit of vinegar, kind of clean off the mat and keep going. All right, now that we've had all our elements cut out, it's time to start to assemble the quilt. Now, one thing that I will tell you that I do have is a 1/4-inch foot. Makes things a lot easier when you're sewing a quilt together. I'm starting with the first block, which is fabric 1 with fabric 3. Basically, I need to sew all the white squares to a red square. Since the fabric is non-directional, I don't need to worry about which direction the fabric is facing. I just need to make sure that the white square is on top of the red square with right sides together. To make this top come together quickly, I've used a method called chain sewing or chain piecing. Basically, rather than locking the seam at the beginning and end of each little square, that's going to be really long, you just kind of group them together and run them through the machine so they are chained together. Then I snip them apart. I don't need to worry about the seams being locked because of how the quick top will be sewn later. You can't skip ironing and quilting, it's a must. Press the seam to the dark, so that would be fabric number 3 or the red fabric, on all the groupings you just sewed. Now, take 2 of your groupings and place them together as shown in the diagram in the Quilt PDF instructions. Be sure the seams are nested. Nested means that the 2 seams you line up, the seams are in opposite directions so the bulk is evenly distributed on both sides of the seam. Repeat until you have 25 of each of the blocks. See the Sew Many Squares PDF for more instructions. All right, now that I have these squares put together, it's time to start to make my rows. Continue to follow the instructions and build each row by row. Take care that the 4 squares you made are turned correctly, meaning the white block should always be in the top left and bottom right. Continue to build your rows and sew the top together as instructed. Now you might think you can skip it, but you can't. You need to press everything. Press for success. I will tell you that I backed my quilt with Minky, which I love, but Minky is not beginner friendly. If you plan on quilting it yourself and you don't have any experience with Minky, now is not the time to try. Stick with a cotton back. Using 505 spray, baste down the batting to the back of the quilt. Baste down the quilt top using the same method. Trim away the excess batting and be sure to keep it about 3 to 4 inches of the batting to the backing around your quilt top. Since I'm using Minky, it can shift, and I've added a few safety pins to tack it down in addition to the 505 spray. I opted to do a simple cross diamond pattern. All right, now that everything is put together, it's time to cut off the excess and bind the quilt. I'm not going to get too into depth in quilt binding in this video, however there's an excellent tutorial by Riley Blake on how to make proper quilt binding. And that's it. I have this beautiful quilt throw that is going to be enjoyed for many, many Christmases to come. I love this combination of fabrics. It's just classic, beautiful, and look at me, I'm a quilter. You can check out more fun projects like my rag quilt, which again, for beginning quilters, easy to put together and to make. And also be sure to check out all those great tutorials on Cricut Design Space and, give it a shot, because if I can do it, I think you can do it. I might have a new addiction. Have a great day, and remember, velvet is pretentious, fleece is fun.